Hey there, how's it going? A couple days ago, I had the pleasure to sit down with Nitzan Pelman, the CEO of ReUp Education, and an incredibly accomplished woman who has spent the better part of 2 decades being a leader in the educational world. She has worked in all different facets of education and all in the capacity of helping and providing underserved and underprivileged communities with better educational opportunities. I think you'll really learn a lot about where her career has taken her, the important work that ReUp Education is doing, as well as kind of the unique role that she's in right now as the founder and CEO of a fast growing startup in Silicon Valley. I hope you enjoy our chat. Thanks for being here. Can you maybe give us a flavor for like career highlights? Where has your professional life taken you in a minute or two? And then also maybe how that creates an arc of the change that you're trying to make in the educational world.
Sure. On a personal level, I would say I've always been sort of like an entrepreneur um, within larger entities. So I was the first development director at Teach for America in New York. Um, I then went to go work for the New York City Department of Education when Joel Klein and Mayor Bloomberg had just taken over the city of New York, and got to like build a number of new programs there that had never been done before. And then I built a nonprofit organization in New York called Citizen Schools, which was a local of a national organization that also was brand new in New York. And so I think like the common link in all of the things that I've done professionally, including ReUp Education, is that they're all entrepreneurial endeavors, either by building a brand new company or organization or building out a new entity within a larger entity. So I think I've just like sort of always had that entrepreneurial spirit. And then in terms of what we're trying to do specifically with ReUp Education, there are 31 million people in this country that have some college and no degree. That means that they have debt, but they have no value for their debt. And we believe that this is in some ways the set of people that are the furthest along on an educational continuum, in that they've graduated from high school, they've filled out FAFSA forms, they've enrolled in college classes, they've taken courses, and then something sort of caused them to take a break. And we think that they're the closest to the finish line of anyone. And so if we can get them to the finish line, they have a meaningful shot at having a much better set of economic opportunities. They might have a better a way to get out of some of the debt because they'll be eligible for higher paying jobs. And so we're really excited about serving this population, and there is no company in the higher ed space that exclusively focuses on these students.
That's great. I want to definitely spend a lot of time talking about ReUp, but before that, I want to go back to the beginning. It seems like you started your career in education. Was there anything early on in life that kind of an experience or person that impressed on you that, hey, I want to go jump right into Teach America, be a part of changing education in the country?
Yeah, I've had my own personal trials and tribulations with education. I think a lot of people in the education space generally do. Um, I grew up in an environment where, either because I was in a very religious world, I grew up as an Orthodox Jew, or because, and so there's sort of like some gender dynamics there. And I think also just were my early days in education, like in kindergarten and first grade, I wasn't a particularly successful student. And I think both of those experiences kind of made me believe, and it was sort of messaged to me in different ways, that I wasn't that capable and didn't have a lot of aptitude. And so I feel like in many ways, once you get labeled in that way, it gets really easy for organizations, for teachers and schools and entities to essentially dismiss you, and that's totally what happened to me early on in my life. And in college, I realized that I had been in many ways cheated out of an education because people didn't have expectations for what I could achieve. And I had hated school and hated learning because I'd never felt successful there. And in college, I had a boyfriend who went to Harvard who had just an insatiable level of curiosity. And being around somebody who was insatiably curious made me insatiably curious. And it sort of opened up a whole Pandora's box of intrigue. And from there came an unbelievable awakening or an epiphany around the fact that I had a lot of catch-up work to do. My 20s were a really, really challenging period of self-teaching and essentially relearning things that I hadn't been taught as a child, like writing a cohesive sentence and using critical thought to analyze an idea. And those were things that took a lot of attention to figure out, but climbed a really, really big mountain around it, and then wanted to make sure that that didn't happen for other people too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but you jump into for America, and you mentioned that you kind of assumed this role that hadn't previously existed there. And then I think if I read in your bio correctly, you went on to work for the Department of Education for a little while. Is that right? And now you're kind of in startup land in California, which is a whole different roller coaster. I'm interested to hear kind of your experience of going from Teach for America, which, is a fairly well established organization, although it's, fairly organic in its roots and probably approach, to the Department of Education, to now to the startup world. And specifically that moment when you get to the Department of Education. I feel like, there's a lot of people who are passionate about education who get to a very bureaucratic organization like that, and kind of their passion totally gets extinguished. And it seems like yours really accelerates there. I'm curious to hear how that kind of happens.
Yeah, I joined these organizations when they were in very, very different stages. So I joined staff at Teach for America in 1999, which is almost 20 years ago, a long time ago. And at the time, there were less than 6 people working in the New York operation. I think there have been headcounts in the New York operation of over 100 at different points in Teach for America's trajectory. So I think at the time, it was still a really small baby nonprofit organization that was just trying to make its way. And so I kind of got in to the ed reform space in a very impressionable stage of my own career. I was in my young 20s. And there were people there who took me under their wing and really helped me think through, what does it mean to get a good education because you were born into a certain zip code, or get a bad education because you were born into a different zip code? And what does it mean to have high expectations around your aptitude and your capacity? And I found that students that we were working with in low-income communities had just incredibly low expectations placed upon them. And I became obsessed with that question. And it's really been a part of my life's career ever since. So I would say I've been pretty passionate about it, but it's taken many different curvatures around what is the key lever to pull on to create change and to create opportunity for people who might not naturally get it in this country. And so if you sort of watch my career from that lens, then it looks like I went from Teach for America, which is a key lever of change, being teachers as the agent of change, to KIPP Academy, which is a charter school. So the lever of change is a school environment, to New Leaders for New Schools, in which the principal was the key lever of change, so the leader of the school. and then to the government, which was the key lever of change being a large institution which creates the systems for change under an administration that was incredibly forward thinking, innovative, reform minded. And there were probably about 100 of us who were young whippersnappers, like high performers who worked really, really hard well into the night every night and kind of got a chance to play around with a lot of things during that period of innovation and real reform-minded leadership.
I think it's wonderful how you've always been able to kind of use that lens to define, it seems like, what your next project is going to be. Always using that kind of at-risk community as someone that you want to focus on helping, and then wherever you are, navigating the best way to do that with, like what you said, whatever the key lever at that organization is. So I stole a couple of snippets from your website, which I just want to kind of tell me if this is an accurate description of what ReUp is. ReUp kind of partners with institutions of higher education, so colleges and universities, and then the folks who have gone to these places and then not completed it, not walked across the stage and gotten their diploma, you create a partnership with the university to re-engage those folks, try to bring them back to the institution and get them that piece of paper that will then unlock lots of opportunity for them and help them pay off their debts quicker and all sorts of other good things.
Mm-hmm. Totally, yeah.
So on your website, it says marketing services for education providers or professional development for students. I'm curious how you frame who your customer is at ReUp. Is it the college? Is it the student? Is it both? And what kind of dynamic does that create?
It's definitely both. We serve the students. Our job is to bring them back to school. We work with what we consider to be good actors in the higher ed space. So we want to make sure that they are servicing students well and that their degrees are valuable and that they're worth something in the marketplace. And if that's true, then we can work with them to help their students finish. A lot of people take breaks from school because of life getting in the way or personal crises. It's not necessarily always or having to do with having a bad experience with the institution itself. And so what we found is that partnering with the universities to re-enroll students that have dropped out of their own universities is actually a really important strategy to engage students in coming back. And it's the easiest way to make sure that the credits transfer and all that good stuff, so that their work that they've already done is valued. The financial model is that we do all of the recruitment of students to come back to school for free. And then just the students that we actually bring back to the university, we do a rev share model. So we share in some of the tuition that we help the university recapture. And so it's a performance contract. We only get paid when we deliver. And then as the student migrates from semester to semester and takes the next set of classes, we then get paid for the coaching work that we do ongoing to help them get to graduation. And so our incentives are to keep working with them as they move through the college process so that they can get to graduation. And every time that they take another step forward, we get incentivized by being paid for that. It's the financial model that incentivizes outcomes as opposed to being paid for inputs, which may or may not actually deliver results.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a great way to structure a win-win relationship if you're able to do your job well. Give me an idea of the scope of this. Like, how many students are you helping? Have you brought back? Is there anything you can share along those lines? And how long have you been doing this? Also, when did the company start?
Well, it took us a little while to establish ourselves as a company and essentially build anchor clients who are innovators and like want to test a new model out and be really on the forefront of innovation. So that process took about a year to bring on our first 3 university partners. And we are We started working with their students in early November. We've had 3 start dates that our students have started to go back to school, and we've brought back a little bit over 300 students to school in the last 2.5 months.
That's wonderful. So you've changed 300 lives. I mean, that's a big accomplishment, bringing them back to the classroom to improve themselves and give themselves a better opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're really pleased by our early results. Ultimately, we want to hold ourselves accountable at graduation, but the first step towards holding yourself accountable to graduation is getting people back to school. So we're very pleased.
That's wonderful. I'm really interested in what that conversation's like with the university for that 1 year before you get those 3 people to kind of take a risk on you. Like what works in getting them to say, okay, this is different, but it seems like it makes sense. Was there any kind of moment of breakthrough, or was it just kind of pounding them with a rock over and over again, and then they finally woke up to it?
A little bit of all of that. um, I think like there. So one of our partners is Western Governors University. They're considered like a really big innovator in the higher ed space. We generally do like to take risks and try to do new things. I think they saw that there was a lot of value to having a performance contract in place. There's really no risk to a university. They only pay if the students come back. So as long as the payment seems reasonable, it makes sense for them to join in. So the biggest question is just, will they take a risk with a new team or in a new company? And I think that's where the power of relationships really come in. And I knew somebody who was on the board of Western Governors and made an introduction to somebody very senior there. So sometimes like it takes some personal relationships to make sure that the validation is there, especially when you don't have a track record in this experience. And yet, I have a track record elsewhere, and everybody on the team has a pretty powerful track record elsewhere. And so we kind of assembled a really top performing group of folks, and so yeah, we were able to get a couple of universities who consider themselves to be innovators to say, like, I don't see how this doesn't, like, I don't see how this hurts us, like, and we can't possibly find the time to focus on this on our own right now.
It seems like kind of once you get your foot in the door, it becomes easier and easier once you prove that the model works. So along the same lines of like having conversations with people that are kind of somewhat difficult and new, and there's new ideas being advanced, what's the most important conversation or thing that you say to students who have left university to get them to come back? What does that conversation look like?
So the first thing that I would say is, like, we're not selling universities to students. 89% of people who drop out of college say that they want to go back, but only 33% actually do. And that's because just like life gets in the way. There's financial crisis, a child might have died, a partnership might have split up, a divorce might have happened, a financial wreckage of some kind, a move professionally from one state to another, a loss of a job. These are all reasons why people tell us that they've dropped out of school. And what we find is that when we call people, they are really touched by our outreach and are excited to know that somebody cares and wants them to finish and wants to coach them and be in their corner until they do. And so our questions are really more around, we know that you needed to take a break. Can you tell us a little bit about why? And can you tell us about whether or not school is a part of your future? And is that something that you want to finish? And if you do, is this the right timing? If it's not, when? And can we be your accountability partner in helping you get there? And I think most students are psyched about that conversation. There's no arm twisting for us.
That probably keeps it very like a very human conversation, not like a, business transaction, which is probably a better place to approach people from. All right, so I'm curious, if you look out at the next 5 years of ReUp, is there anything, what has to happen for ReUp to be really successful? Like, is there a technology leap that we make? Is there a, societal change that happens, a cultural change? I'm curious what your thoughts about kind of the next 5 years and the evolution of the company are.
We very intentionally built this company with um, very little technology to start with, um, because we really wanted to understand our students in the rawest form. So we very manually engaged our students in coming back to school with human coaches. But since then, we've started to layer in more and more and more technology, because there's just like um, obvious ways to build more efficiency into that model. So there's the use of chatbots and the use of automation and the use of nudging and checklists and like real just-in-time coaching related to step 3 versus step 4 versus step 5 in the process. And those are all things that we're building now. And when you take that into amalgamated with IP related to marketing specifically and understanding this population in deep ways, so we, are gaining real insight into what messages resonate for which kinds of students that have which kinds of backgrounds and what time of the day and like all that kind of stuff. And then the use of big data as well. So, this segment of the population did well or not well with X, Y, and Z courses, or, had these characteristics, and then are responsive to the outreach in these kinds of ways. And all of that sets up a predictive model for us to really understand like who's most likely to re-enroll and who's most likely to succeed. And so the real like composite of all of those things together, marketing, big data, humans, and technology, is sort of the 4 parts of the table that are going to be that product of ReUp that universities can participate in.
It's so much more complicated than I would have thought of it. But I mean, you are building a big time company, so it makes sense that it would be more than meets the eye. All right, a couple more questions, and then I'll let you get back to the rest of your day. Tell me about, this is a 2-part question. You'll understand what the second part is once you hear the first. What's the most challenging part of your job? What's the most challenging day look like?
Oh yeah, I mean, pick your pick your category. Um, I think like when you're a startup, like you don't have infinite resources, so you have to use your money wisely. You have to hire talent and attract talent, even though you may not have a fancy, shingle out yet. So it's about what we will do as opposed to what we have done, and attracting people who want to build that with you. It's about convincing universities, quite honestly, that they are not going to do as good of a job potentially as we would if we just focused exclusively on supporting them. And so sometimes our biggest competitor is the university itself, who thinks that they are going to do this on their own. And to your point, it's a lot more complicated than meets the eye. And so I think that our challenge sometimes is kind of getting them to see that there's really no reason why they would try to do it in-house, and are generally not going to have nearly as good of a results and affect. And as we get bigger and as we do more and as the months tick by and we get more clients, the case can be made much easier. But when you're in startup, like, it's a little bit more of a sell on what it will be as opposed to what it actually is.
So on the flip side of that, what's the most rewarding day you've had at ReUp thus far? Like, what's the best day you've ever had?
I think I'm about to have it actually, because we're in the middle of redesigning our website. And so we're going to spotlight 8 students that we've had the chance to get back to school in the last few months. And I get to do interviews with all of them in the next like 2 to 3 days and listen in more on their own stories. And I have a sense of what they've fought and what they've battled with in their own lives and what it means and what it will take for them to complete school. And I can't wait to sort of hear from their own voices what that looks like for them. And I'm really excited about profiling them proudly on our website, because I think society has conventional wisdom thoughts about these people, that they're not sort of the most successful people. They're people who dropped out of college. Like, we don't have positive thoughts about them. But when you go deeper into what their stories are and what makes them tick, I think people might start to reassess that stereotype or that set of conventional wisdom.
All right, final 2 questions I try to ask everyone. Best piece of advice that you've ever gotten?
In terms of what? In terms of like starting a company, or in terms of being a woman leader, or in terms of
In terms of doing something that's new and different and kind of not the well-worn path as we think of it.
I I think that, like, this space is about people saying no a lot more than they say yes. In every space, you might be recruiting talent that might have other offers. You might be recruiting university partners that might be on the fence. You might be talking to students that aren't ready for this. So every